forgive me if my eyesight's failing me, but I see, the black line being what we have today as the real temperatures, and they seem to be tracking most strongly towards scenario C, maybe scenario B, but certainly very much along the scenario C line. Now, I'm just looking at Hansen's own words here from his website, and scenario C describes a scenario that assumes rapid curtailment of trace gas emissions, such as the net climate forcing ceases to increase after the year 2000. And that isn't what's happened at all, is it?
No, but the graph I was showing you was scenario B, which is the most likely scenario.
You had highlighted scenario B, which was the middle graph there.
Which was the most likely one.
Scenario C assumes rapid curtailment.
And well, I'm not talking about scenario C. I'm pointing out that scenario B is the most likely scenario, and that's the one that matched what we actually saw. You also have to
does that
point
match,
out,
with respect, does that match the actual scenarios?
No, well, let me just explain then what I mean. So, as I pointed out, that you shouldn't be kind of misled by the jiggling up and down of these graphs. The point is that the atmosphere has a lot of weather effects and short-term effects. Also, in those simulations, Hansen put in the effect of volcanic emissions. Of course, you can't, in 1987, know when those volcanic eruptions are going to occur, so they just put them in at a couple of times. One of them was put in 95. In fact, there was actually an eruption in 91. And so that's why you kind of get a difference between these two graphs, that one drops down early, the observations drop down early, but then the actual scenario B drops down a little bit later. So, I mean, all that sort of variability is not what's important. What's important is the trends. And what Jim Hansen was able to show was that for what was likely scenario for the CO2 emissions, that this trend tracked what the trend we actually see is. That's the important point, is that beforehand, he was able to forecast a 20-year trend that we actually see.
But that scenario forecast a linear increase in CO2, not the exponential increase that we've actually seen. Carbon dioxide increases over this period have been tracking to scenario A. Yes, but in fact, there's
we'll allow that response and then we'll move on, I think, because we're coming quite close to the end of it, and you can have the conversation later, and Malcolm might like to comment as well.
There is a recent paper by Matthew and Weaver in Nature, where they've actually looked at a situation sort of totally hypothetical. If we were to almost instantaneously reduce our emissions, so tomorrow, back to 280 ppm of pre-industrialisation, what would happen? In fact, it's interesting, we'd actually almost instantaneously stop the temperature rise, and then we could be on a path back to lower temperatures, right? So if we could switch off all our emissions instantly, the Earth would start to stop its ever-increasing rise in temperature, and the temperatures would actually stabilise and then start to decrease. So, of course, the reality is we can't switch off CO2 emissions instantly. That's not possible. But it does show the fact that it is a kind of societal decision, right? What we do with CO2 is an important driver. So we're not actually inevitably tracked on the. I mean, there is this view that the Earth's on infinite inertia, that we can't stop the rise. We can if we knew how to stop emissions, get emissions back to.
Look, I think the point. Excuse me. The point was, are the models skillful in forecasting our future?
The answer is yes.
The answer appears to be that they're certainly lacking some details.
Well,
I'm confident they've covered all the internal variability factors.
Perhaps you can continue the conversation. I'm sure it's a very illuminating one for many of you. One last question, and then Ivan might like to make a comment before we conclude. Hero, yes.
Question to the last speaker. Why do you think Europe has been so much at the forefront of meeting this challenge? And related to that is, it seems to me that the great struggle over climate change is the challenge of meeting the pressures of individual interest groups, representative of large corporations that are making high profits out of the carbon economy. Why doesn't, what's happened to those pressures in Europe? And what does that tell us about European society?
That's a very complex question.
Oh, sorry. 3 questions.
That was why is Europe at the forefront? I think we see more the benefits also. The challenge, of course, we know we have inflated, we know that the costs occurring if we don't do anything a lot higher, and the risks in terms of international security, and that's the, I think that's something that's in people's minds. And then on the other side, we see the chance, the benefits of moving forward in terms of energy security, in terms of ecological benefits, in terms of economic benefits. That seems more clearly in the mind of people in Europe. And that maybe relates to your second question, what about the vested interests? Of course there are vested interests, it's all about money. I mean, if you switch your economy from a fossil-based economy to a renewable economy, it means that there are people who lose, and it's the big energy companies of today, and there are others who win, and it's always that those who have something to lose are a lot stronger. You know, the public choice, they're always loud and scream and try to influence politicians, and the others who are only growing slightly, you know, they're the future generations, they're not going to voice. I think that's obvious. And what I've observed in Australia is that over the last year, I've been here since July last year, it seems to me as if vested interests are a lot stronger in Australia, and they have a lot more influence on the politicians. You just take the mining tax discussion as an example. I mean, it's unbelievable how strong the mining sector can be. And that's not the case in Europe and Germany. There are also, of course, there are also industries who have interest, but I don't know why they don't get through so much as in Australia. But I think that really relates to the political system and the cultural system. I'm not capable of answering that.
Stefan?
Yeah, I'd just like to add another sort of psychological component to that in answer to your question. One of the things you've got to keep in mind is that the warming in the northern hemisphere has been far outpacing the warming in the southern hemisphere by a ratio, I think, of the slope is about 2 to 1. And one consequence is that if you drive through Central Europe, you just cannot overlook the absence of the glaciers that used to be there just a couple of decades ago. I think the visual markers and the changes in weather patterns have just been far more visible to Europeans. You can actually sort of feel it happening. There are tornadoes now in Germany, which never happened in the 60s or 70s. There are species migrating, glaciers retreating. I mean, stuff is actually visually happening in the northern hemisphere that we here in Australia, to a large extent, don't see. And I actually think that that's a very important component. That people are much more, when they can see things, it's much easier to accept something than if you just see data.
I just wanted to make a quick comment on the vested interests. And the Environmental Protection Authority in Western Australia released a report last month, and buried in it was this really interesting information that they estimated that WA's greenhouse emissions could grow by 75% just over the next few years, with the number of projects that are currently under approval and a number of projects that are going into the environmental impact assessment process. So the Minister for the Environment has on her desk at the moment 3 sort of approvals waiting sign-off for expansion of Blue Water's coal and a new coal-fired power station called Coolabah. So it's a very sort of live issue, and I think this is the role of active citizenship for us to be actually asking our politicians to take action in these areas. So, over to you.
Thank you. And before we conclude, we'll leave you with the last word if there's something you particularly want to say, because I feel it would be awful for us to leave you. John, by the way, is speaking tomorrow again in a colloquium in psychology in the Myers Street building. But Ivan, if you can finish us off.
Well, I'll just say 2 points relevant. I think everything that's been said so far. My background is sea level, and can you hear me? Yeah. And I guess from my perspective, what I've find quite interesting is climate change is only one very small aspect of it. I think the other important thing is we've put in the wrong places. And so, irrespective of whether we are rising our sea levels or not, I think, as New Orleans so dramatically illustrates, if we build near the sea at some point, we will get flooded by extreme event. I think the other point I'll just make very quickly, similar to what you said, is even if we completely cut our CO2 emissions now, we will commit to at least another 300 to 400 years of sea level rise, irrespective of that, because of the inertia in the ocean system. So I think that was relevant. So that's,
Thank
Good.
Can I, on your behalf, thank our speakers and panelists? So, attention to the fact that there are fridge magnets and car stickers on the way up which have the newly constructed website which will enable you to keep up to date with the science that's going on here at the University of Western Australia and in other universities, and we're grateful that this is a collaborative effort across our institutions. So thank you very much again for coming and